Okay, so today we're gonna be trying a trick that I think is really cool and I don't see a lot of people using in this particular way. And I don't know what I ended up calling this video, but basically what we're doing is we're using one microphone all across the drum set. So as an ambient mic and also as close mics simultaneously. And we're going to do this using pretty common sampling and triggering techniques. But the issue we're basically trying to address is that you might have one microphone that is much nicer than your other microphones, or maybe just one mic that you'd like to use as a room microphone, but also as close mics, but you don't have multiple mics. So for me, I've got my venerable Coles 4038, which I love using a pair of these as room mics, but I've also heard such good things about these as bass drum microphones that, I want to try it as a bass drum mic as well. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using, like I said, sampling and triggering techniques in order to get the sound from this room, this session, this drum set, and be able to blend it in with the other mics that we're using, the less expensive mics that we're not as interested in using. And what I'm gonna try doing is basically making samples of the entire kit exactly as it is with the Coles 4038, so we'll be able to hear what it sounds like to not only have these as room mics, but also as a close mic on the bass drum, snare drum, and on all the toms. So let me explain more specifically how this is going to work. I'll give you some benefits, some drawbacks, and then of course there will be a demo. So how this is going to work is, if you're not familiar with the process of sampling and triggering, basically what we can do is we can capture a sample of a sound. So that might be the Coles 4038 miking the rack tom, and I get a sample or a set of samples of that sound where I'm playing nothing but the rack tom. So I have that sound of this mic in this room recording this drum specifically, and then I can later use the process of triggering to take a source like the SM57 that I already have on the drum, and I could record a performance with the 57 but layer in or replace that sound with the sample that I got from the 4038. Now, the process of sampling and triggering is very popular these days, and people are using Stephen Slate samples all over the place. But what is unique in particular about this situation is that I am using one of my microphones on my kit in the exact same configuration and setup that I'm going to be actually recording the performance in. So it's going to blend much more authentically than if I had used, a crystal analogy sample from a completely different studio and a completely different kit, and then just stacked it on top of what I was recording here. So effectively, it is going to sound like I recorded the entire kit close mic'd with Coles 4038s, which is super uncommon. I'm just doing it for fun here. We'll see what it sounds like, but the main thing I wanted to do was get the bass drum sound, and I have done this before. I have recorded a kick sample with a 4038 and then layered it on with my other mics, and it worked great. So one of the drawbacks of sampling in this way is that you have a finite number of dynamic levels that you can replace. Obviously, if I'm recording with the microphone live, whatever I play is exactly what the microphone is going to hear. And with our triggering process, we are going to be able to record distinct dynamic levels so that if I hit the drum softer, it will replace that hit with a softer or louder hit from the Coles 4038. But there's only so much of that you can do. So if I was recording like a drum solo or a performance that had a lot of nuance and a lot of dynamicism, I probably wouldn't use this technique. But a lot of what I'm recording will have mostly kick, snare, and hi-hat, not a lot of dynamicism, and maybe just single hits on the toms that I have at one dynamic level anyways. So for recording tracks like rock or indie or whatever it might be, this technique works pretty much flawlessly. Another potential drawback or limitation that we'll have here is that I won't try and effectively replace cymbals. Those never really end up sounding right to me when you try and layer those in or use crash and ride samples. So we can't really replace cymbals, and we can't replace any sort of ambient mic. Like, I can't have the Coles be room mics and overheads. I can really only do single shots. I can only replace a microphone that I want to use as a close mic on a source. One of the other drawbacks that I think is also kind of a benefit is that when you record the sample, you are going to have 0 bleed. So for some people, that might sound like a drawback because you don't get, the natural bleed from the rest of the microphones. But for most of us, we prefer to have as little bleed into the close mics as possible. Like I said, some people kind of prefer to have some bleed into the close mics, but you are not going to get that with this situation. So depending on who you are, that might be a drawback or a benefit. Another benefit, in addition to these blending perfectly with the other sources that I get from my live recording, because I'm recording everything in the same room and the same session, is that you will actually get better phase coherence than if I had actually had extra Coles 4038s and mic'd the kick with 2 microphones. Because they were recording at the same time, the transients would align slightly out of phase, and so that's something that I would have to fix. Whereas because I'm going to be replacing it, it's going to replace the sample right at the transient line, which means that we should automatically get better phase coherence if I blend this in than if I had actually had extra microphones and done it live. As far as the gear goes that we're actually going to be sampling, I am using my DW Exotic Collector's Santa Monica series drum set. Got 12, 14, 16-inch toms, 22-inch bass drum, and then for the snare, I'm going with the 6.5 by 14 Dunnett Aluminum 2N. So I won't go too deep into the actual sampling process. I think there are a lot of videos out there like that, but I'll kind of show you what I'm doing to get the different dynamic levels and how I'm recording each drum. And then I will, of course, give you a demo of what the close mics that are currently on the kit sound like with the 4038s as room mics, and then I'll start to blend in the samples, and then I'll show you what it sounds like with the close mics completely replaced, so that you're getting a kit with room mics and then everything close mic'd with 4038s, which, like I said before, is uncommon. I don't think I've ever seen anyone do that, and I'm really curious to hear what it sounds like. Okay, so hopefully that was of interest to some of you. Like I said before, sampling and triggering is not uncommon at all, and it's not even that uncommon to take samples of any session that you're in just so that you can replace them later if need be. But what I don't see a lot of people doing is specifically using a different or nicer or more expensive microphone to get a particular sample and then replacing later with that. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and let me know what you think. Let me know if this is helpful for you at all. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.